Radio with Gorgeous George and Gold. This is what we do and why we do it, baby. We rollin'!
Covering MMA from all over the world, this is the premier stop for all your combat sports needs. MMAjunkie Radio, the only show broadcasting live from the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. The lights are on and the mics are hot. It's time to get your MMA fix, junkies. Take it away, Big John.
Gorgeous George and Goes, are you ready? Junkie Nation, are you ready? Well, let's get it on.
From the fight capital of the world inside the beautiful Mandalay Bay Race and Sportsbook, you are listening to MMAjunkie Radio, the only show that matters. I am the captain today. I am Goes. My first mate, Richard Hunter from Phone Booth Fighting. Gorgeous George is off today, as is Dan Tom. But you know what? It's going to be a fun show. It's going to be an even funner show with you guys involved. So why don't you guys get lined up here? There is a lot to talk about. 877-FIGHT-93 if you want to talk to us. Talk about all the big news that's out there today. The big story, of course, TJ Dillashaw. We will get right into that here at the top of the hour here. Richard Hunter, thank you for coming in.
Happy to be here.
You and I have a job today, and that job will it be defending MMA? Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What are we going to do? Because every day, this is a soap opera.
Yeah.
And another chapter in our soap opera happened today. Former UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw has accepted a 2-year suspension for testing positive for EPO.
Yes.
That's as bad as you can get when it comes to that type of stuff. What was your reaction when you read that news?
Yeah. Probably my reaction was maybe up to this point kind of surprised at the lack of reaction from TJ.
A little bit, right?
You know what I mean? I mean,
yeah.
he made a statement initially about some disappointment and stuff like that, but it was a little generic, definitely to the point that you're thinking, okay, something else has to come out once we find out what this substance is, even if it's a denial, even if it's we're going to get to the bottom of this investigation, something like that, which we've certainly heard plenty of. Really haven't heard anything like that.
Well, it all started a little differently than what we're used to, right? He came out, he said, I'm going to relinquish my belt.
Yep.
That was a little refreshing, but we didn't really know exactly what was going on. And I guess by him relinquishing his belt, it's not exactly an admission of guilt, but it's pretty close, right? Then all this comes out. Do you think he did that to kind of avoid all of this conversation having to come out on this day? Because you would think if he made those efforts on that day to come out and say the things he said, I would think he'd have something planned for today. I thought that was weird that he didn't come out and say anything.
I thought so, too.
Because I thought it would have gone hand in hand with what he did initially, and that was kind of just stepping forward and kind of handling things for himself.
Yeah, it's one of these things where the silence ends up speaking volumes. And then also, like you said, the fact that it's EPO, anybody who's followed this stuff closely enough knows that even amongst USADA flags, that's not an everyday occurrence. So it really, I think, makes it even more paramount that there be some type of statement. I tell you what it reminded me of a little bit in a way, like when you talk about relinquishing the belt and stuff like that. It's not a direct analogy, obviously, but kind of the deflection that occurred when Conor McGregor retired the day before the news broke about the assault allegations against him. Two different worlds for sure, but that idea of let me go ahead and preemptively distance myself not from the story but from the title to save the company maybe some direct exposure. Yeah, and then, the fact that he gets 2 years, there doesn't seem to be initially any protest to it, especially when you think about what that means to TJ's career, because 2 years to the career of TJ Dillashaw at this point in his career is, I don't think can be overestimated what that means at this point in time.
Definitely. And we're going to get to some of that stuff here in a second. As much as this part of our sport is a soap opera, there are other parts that aren't. And we will also have two guests today. We have Eryk Anders, UFC light heavyweight. He will be on the show as well as Bellator flyweight Heather Hardy. Some feel-good stories there. I like talking to those two people. We will have them on the show today. Going back here to TJ Dillashaw, Look, man, as it stands, this means we're not going to be able to see him fight again until it's retroactive, so January 18th, 2021. Mm-hmm. And even then, when we get him back, what kind of TJ Dillashaw comes back? Mm-hmm. Who's going to be associated with TJ Dillashaw? You know, Dwayne Ludwig has been his coach for the longest time, but Dwayne's always kind of come off to me as somebody that wouldn't stand too much for that type of stuff, right? Very honorable martial arts is something that he always talks about. So I'm curious to see what his stance is going to be on that. The people involved in his camp, how are the fans going to react to him? Does he just get forgotten over 2 years? I mean, at first, some of these fighters that we've seen gone through something like this, Fabricio Verdum, a couple of weeks into it, man, the heavyweight division is going to suck without Fabricio, and then they just kind of go away, right? Mm-hmm. How do you think he'll be received coming back?
Well, I think he could certainly fall into that category, and that part of it, not necessarily through any fault of his own. If you just talk about where is possible that he may be maybe not completely forgotten, but just kind of out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, because you're talking about a guy who, and I've been a big fan of his over the years, but a guy who, as well known as he has become to to the A-level mixed martial arts fans, to the rank and file, to the general public, not as recognizable a name. I mean, he was somebody who was just starting to, you think about like the TV ad that he did with Wonder Boy, where they're wearing the
Van Heusen?
Yeah, the office
those,
clothes or
yeah.
whatever. But, stuff like that. I mean, you're just starting to get the TV commercials, things like that. And, but you still are maybe one of the lesser-known champions when it comes to, again, that general public of fandom. And I think he had an opportunity. He was definitely in the sweet spot of his career right now to accelerate that and to make it to that next level. He was always an exciting fighter. He was always a guy. The thing I always love saying about TJ Dillashaw is he would go for a finish when he didn't need a finish. He was always the guy who would be ahead 4-0 on the scorecard, like he was against Renan Barão, and then still finish him. That meant a lot to, like I said, to A-level fans, but I still think he had progress to make in his career in terms of the mainstream notoriety, and now that will be gone for sure because 2 years are going to pass, and he'll be 35, I guess, at that point when he comes back, which, in the lighter weight classes, that can mean something too, because that's where you start to lose speed. That's where you start to lose a step, and that can mean everything in those lower weight divisions.
George and I, for the last 2 years, have probably been trying to rank what you have in the UFC. We believe there's stars, superstars, mega stars would be probably like your Ronda Rousey type people, your John Jones. Conor. Maybe even an ultra star, because Conor, I think, is just way and above even those guys, right?
Agreed.
A TJ Dillashaw, where does he fall under something like that? Because you're right, he was just starting to turn that corner. He's a marketable guy. He's starting to do commercials, stuff like that. He's a little bit more edgy now with the snake tattoo, which, by the way, probably came back and bit him in the ass. But where did he rank? Because I felt like he was kind of on the cusp of maybe – I would consider him a star. I thought maybe he was on the cusp of becoming a superstar. Where do you have him?
Yeah, that's where I had him too. But he needed to make that transition just in terms of – career branding if he wanted to be at that level. I mean, to a lot of these guys, it means something, as it should, to be recognized as one of the few greats among, again, A-level fans, X's and O's fans, whatever you want to call them. But to the cut below that, and let's face it, that's where you start to get into the pay-per-view points and the endorsements and things like that, which are particularly hard to come by in the Reebok era. You can't wear those sponsored into the cage anymore, so you do have to be able to be creative. You do have to get the attention of Madison Avenue companies outside the octagon. And like I said, I thought he was at that exact position to be able to do, because he was still a UFC champion. I mean, he was still, even if you're thinking of signing him up and you don't know the name, you recognize a UFC championship belt. You recognize
Definitely.
that means something. There's only a handful of those. So to have that, even despite the Henry Cejudo fight, that did not affect his bantamweight legacy. I tell you what, it would be tough. I think there's only going to be a few examples where if you relatively measure it, people who have gotten caught up in USADA suspensions, relatively measure it, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of people that you can say were poised to lose more than TJ Dillashaw. Does that make sense? Relatively speaking.
Yeah, okay.
I don't mean in actual dollars, but I mean where you are compared to where you were headed, compared to now you're on the bench for 2 years, two pivotal years in your career. I think this is one of the sadder examples of that I can think of.
Well, today's daily debate is going to kind of focus on that a little bit. I will read it to you right now, and if you guys want to vote, you can go to MMA Junkie. We're at MMA Junkie. Can TJ Dillashaw repair his legacy if he chooses to return from his USADA suspension in January 2021? That's something that we will touch on a little later in the hour. I want to touch on something that you kind of brought up, and you brought up the name Renan Barão, and for TJ Dillashaw to get to the places that we're talking about, becoming a star, possibly becoming a superstar, a pay-per-view draw, he had to go through some people to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of fights that maybe I won't mention here, but there are two in particular, two fighters that I can think of, and that's Cody Garbrandt and Renan Barão. Those two both suffered 2 KO losses, and you could kind of look at their trajectory after that and say they haven't really been the same since those.
Yeah.
Okay? What happens with guys like that? What do you tell them? USADA is supposed to be here to protect this from happening to fighters. But we're not really getting to some of these guys until the damage has been done.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell those fighters?
That's a great point. And I had not even initially thought of that when this news came out about TJ, but you're right. And in Cody's case, I don't know if you've seen the clip from, I guess it was a few years ago, but Garbrandt was on mic at a press conference saying that he always thought TJ was on banned substances. And he implicated, his connections to Team Alpha Male. And I think at the time it was said in one of those seasonal press conference situations where everybody's talking trash, and there was a lot of heat between the two of them at the time. So maybe everybody didn't focus on that in the way that all of a sudden they did when that clip got unearthed after word came out that TJ had been flagged by USADA. But that's a great point. That's sort of like, in a way, you kind of fall into that Mark Hunt category, where Mark Hunt starts pointing out, hey, I fought this guy, suspension, bad test, all that kind of stuff. And then, but you're right. Even with that, his career continued onward, in Barão's case in particular. Because Garbrandt, at least, we'll see what happens. He's certainly had a rough time of it of late. But I would say that Renan Barão is probably the prime example of someone who was at that pinnacle, arguably, at the time in the conversation for best pound for pound, or right there. And then all of a sudden you had a guy that just vanquished you.
Yeah.
But now they have this.
Well, I'll tell you what. We do have a tweet from Cody Garbrandt that we will read when we come back from the break. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, feel free to call in 877-FIGHT-93. That's 877-344-4893. Call in, join in the discussion. I'm Goes. That's Richard Hunter. We will be back in a few seconds here, and we're going to continue with the big news of TJ Dillashaw today here on MMA Junkie Radio, Fight Nation, Channel 156.
and they get paid to be lame. Here are Gorgeous George and Goes.
Following the conclusion of tonight's game in Oklahoma City, listen to a complete recap of all the action from around the league on NBA Radio's post-game show. Get locker room reaction, expert analysis, and more on Sirius 207 XM86 and streaming on your Sirius XM connected devices and speakers. I am Goes. This is Richard. Gorgeous George is off today. Dan Tom is off today. It's our ship today. And good song, Josh. That brings back some memories. We used to start our show with that song for about 2 or 3 years.
I remember those days.
Yeah. You big Motley Crue fan?
Then. Yes, huge. I was just saying off air, I was in the audience at Reunion Arena in Dallas, Texas on the Theater of Pain tour when the Home Sweet Home live video was filmed.
Oh, wow.
And then I saw the last ever Motley Crue show a couple of New Year's Eves ago at the Staples Center, where the last song played was Home Sweet Home. And I thought about all the wasted years of my life that have passed in between those two events.
I can imagine. I could see it now. Well, we teased it before we went to break. And Josh, I want to get your reaction here on what happened, what your thoughts were when you heard that news, because it seems like every day. I think we said it on yesterday's show, right? Like somebody else is going to do something crazy. This comes out. We were expecting something like this, but what was your thoughts when you saw it?
I mean, honestly, just disappointed, if I'm honest. You know, and I'm still hoping perhaps there's some kind of explanation. I don't know what it would be, but I always like to judge people based on my encounters with them. And, you know, one of the jobs as a producer is to book guests, obviously. And whenever I would deal with TJ, he was always super cool to me and always very polite, always showed up for his interviews. A lot of these guys flake. So, you know, my opinion of him was always high. Always respected the hell out of him in the cage as well. So, you know, it sucks. I mean, you know, I don't know if anyone's really happy about it. You know, it's unfortunate for sure. And, you know, it's like you guys were saying in the first segment, it seemed like he was just right on that cusp, man. I mean, filming commercials, potentially to become a champ, and I mean, now no belts with a potential stain on his record. You know, it's just it's an unfortunate situation all in all.
You have Cody Garbrandt's tweet, and believe it or not, Conor McGregor found a way to get involved as well. You have a subsequent tweet. Can you read those off for us?
So I got subtweets of subtweets of subtweets, 3 degrees of tweets.
Let's do it.
So Brett Okamoto tweets about a special test in the Dillashaw case that came back positive for EPO. Cody subtweets, test all his samples. I bet for a fact more EPO pops up at TJ Dillashaw is a coward. TJ, call me when that suspension is up. Scumbag. Then Conor McGregor subtweets the subtweet, says, respect, Cody. The loyalty you showed for Uriah and your team on that faithful day in the tough gym will forever stand out to me. Enjoy this moments and those return victories to you, clean and unbeaten.
How crazy is this world, man? That you actually get a tweet from Conor McGregor to TJ Dillashaw. To Cody Garbrandt.
To Cody Garbrandt, yeah. Yeah.
But that's the world we live
What
in?
now? All right, so about the special test.
Okay.
Is the inference there that there was a test done that is not normally done and you saw the test?
Yes. So the way it works is this particular test people do not get tested for this every time after fight night. Okay, it could be like 1 in 4 or something of your fights, right? So what that does is it kind of leaves that question mark that if he was tested for this in particular that night and he got caught, actually, I believe they even went back and tested one that they had done weeks before, and that came up positive. So then the question comes, well, how long has this been going on, right? If he hasn't been taking these tests, and I think that's something that ties into what we were talking about was. USADA is supposed to be here to protect these fighters. All right, it's great that we caught on that TJ Dillashaw has been doing this, but we kind of caught on a little too late here, right? I mean, I would imagine the only reason you don't test for this after every fight is something that we hear all the time, and that's it's too expensive. But is there really a price tag on safety?
Yeah. Is this? I guess the other question I would have is it just random and his number just happened to come up, or is there probable cause? I mean, is this something where maybe if they suspect something, then they implement this test? I'm not sure about that.
I'm not too sure about that, but I do know that he is one of the most highly tested guys in the UFC. So that's a tough one to take, man. But you know, let's do this. We posed the question to you guys earlier, 877-FIGHT-93, to call in, sound off on what just happened. Let's start off with Marco from Waco. He wants to talk TJ Dillashaw. What's up, Marco?
Marco from Waco, ¿Qué pasa, dudes?
¿Qué onda?
So, first of all, you're the captain of this Titanic ship. Don't drive it into an iceberg, please.
I know.
Don't drive it to an iceberg. So, let me start by saying that in retrospect, we avoid a big PR disaster because imagine that in the freaking inaugural ESPN debut, TJ Dillashaw on the Marquee 5 beats Henry Seguro and becomes a champ, and then all these shits happen. So, in a way, it's a good thing that Henry Seguro won because it is a bad look, but it's not so much of a bad look right now.
Yeah,
but
I can agree with that.
I've been making this point everywhere regarding the punishment because, Richard knows, his friend Frank Mir went to the same kind of ordeal with USADA when they launched a punishment, and the process, I think, is unfair because at the end of the day, the New York State Athletic Commission, that was the jurisdiction where this fight took place, gave TJ Dillashaw a 1-year suspension. And I will imagine that if the government, where the state attorney general is the one that brings out the charges, already give you a 1-year suspension, USADA, that is not a jurisdiction, it's not a sanctioning body, it's a private company that is contracted by the UFC, to give you a 3-year suspension, I will be taking that to the court. Because the only way the USADA suspension affects fighters is while they're contracted with the UFC. Like Frank Mir did, he got out of his contract, and as soon as they let him go, if he would choose to, he could go fight anywhere in the planet because that USADA suspension did not apply anymore. Same with TJ Dillashaw. He could go and say, okay, I will only accept the New York Athletic Commission suspension because that is the government giving me the suspension, and I will fight on court this USADA suspension because it's completely, it got no legal basis for it. Bottom line is, it's a private company contracted by the UFC, and these independent contractors are getting sanctioned, while if they are outside of the UFC, the only suspension that applies is the New York State Athletic Commission. So what is the fairness on that? Discuss this out.
Well, let me say this about, I think, the difference in the situation with TJ compared to recent conversations about other situations with USADA. Because I do think, and yeah, I have personal experience with this because of Frank, but even other stories, like the most recent events with John Jones, things like that, that to some degree, I think the tide has turned on USADA in the sense that when we get into measuring picograms and metabolites and these little trace elements and pulsing things that are acknowledged as possibly having been around for years and years and they may never leave the system and things like that, that's one thing. And that, I think, is a conversation that's legitimately worth having because as Jeff Nowitzki himself has talked about publicly on the record, these companies get so competitive, every company is trying to be able to detect a level lower than the other company to make it the gold standard of testing and things like that. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. And so that's what separates this situation with TJ from the other conversations that we've been having where USADA is a bit suspect. Sure. And especially not hearing anything, again, from TJ.
That's odd, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to Hal in Chicago. What's up, Hal?
Hi, guys.
What up?
So, Rich, I like the good choice for a partner tonight. A couple goofballs.
Thank you.
For the show.
We should get a voicemail made.
Yeah, you should see us on Fight Night.
Get a voiceover made. A couple of goofballs. Talking MMA.
That's like the best job, isn't it? To be a voiceover guy.
It is
like
a great
David
job.
Attenborough, that guy's,
Yeah.
I mean, he's a narrator, but whatever. Hey, yeah, man. I mean, I got a question for Josh. Josh, are you disappointed in TJ? Like, oh, he was my hero, and now I'm disappointed, or are you disappointed?
I'm more disappointed that I had to sit through that when you said you were going to make a comment about the situation instead of address me, Hal. Deuces.
Damn, he got cut out. And on that, I think we're about break time, right, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just playing the heel there. Sorry, Hal.
That's a wrestling term.
Yeah.
We're going to get into some pro wrestling, too, at some point today and tomorrow because Dave LaGreca will be our guest tomorrow We're going to be talking a lot of pro wrestling because pro wrestling's affected MMA a lot. And I want to find out which one's affected more, MMA pro wrestling or pro wrestling MMA. But let's take this quick break here. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio, Sirius XM, Fight Nation, Channel 156. We'll be back with Heather Hardy.
It's always the
Here they are, George and Goes.
We need to throw a pie at that guy one day. He's always throwing us under the bus with our
He sure
guests.
is.
Yeah, isn't he? Anyway, I believe that's Alicia Keys. I know I'll get hate for saying I believe and not actually knowing, but I'm pretty sure it is Alicia Keys.
Me, I would have had no clue.
And she is completely right. This girl is on fire. We are going to bring in Bellator flyweight Heather Hardy. She will be fighting June 14th at the Garden, live on DAZN. Bellator. Heather Hardy, good to have you back on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, guys.
You're here with Goes and Richard Hunter from Phone Booth Fighting. It was fun to see the press conference today. It was fun to see you in good spirits up there on the dais. And I think I know what put you in good spirits. And that is the fact that you get to fight in New York again. And there's something about New York, whether it's boxing, MMA, that brings another level out of you, isn't there?
It sure is. I mean, just being able to put on in front of my fans, and you know, I'm so involved in the fight community here because I'm a boxer, a mixed martial artist, but I'm also a boxing coach, a kickboxing coach. I teach boxing. I basically live at the gyms I train and work at. So everyone, you know, around me is so excited as well.
Now, this is a unique situation because they announced your fight, but we don't have an opponent just yet, and it feels like we're very close to that. Even in the time that's passed since the press conference, do you feel like we've gotten a little bit closer? Do you have any kind of timetable on as when we can get that announcement?
Well, it's really hard to say because I'm not usually involved in that process. You know, like I'm kind of one of those rare cases, right? Like I came from a different sport, and in boxing, I never wanted to know who I was fighting. I would let my promoter pick somebody, and my manager would, you know, so it's really between my manager and Bellator right now. They're going to let me know who and when I'm fighting. That's kind of how it works for me.
Did that situation, even if we go over to boxing, and you've had a tremendous run over there in boxing, but the whole thing that goes back and forth between management, promoters, fighters, you know, having to wait for people to, so many different heads to come together to make fights happen, did that kind of sour you a little bit more on combat sports where now it's just easier just to focus on yourself and just let those people handle it? Or do you like to kind of get in there and figure out what exactly is going on?
I like to handle all the other aspects of my career, but I've learned early on that there are politics in sports. Like, as much as we call them sports, there's really a business. Chrissy Martin said as soon as one ticket is sold to an event and someone can profit off it, it's not really a sport anymore, it's a business. So I learned early on that it's never really about the best fighting the best or even matchups or anything like that. It's about logistically what can we make happen at this time for this amount of money on this venue and things like that. So it's really gotten out of my hands, and it's always really been out of a fighter's hands.
Well, I feel like if you're a fan of Heather Hardy, whether that's boxing or MMA, you just want to see Heather Hardy fight. And apparently in boxing, it just seems like people can't get together to make that happen. And so now you did what I think we would want every fighter to do, and that's just stay active. You're going to come over here and finish out this Bellator run. But what would you say would be the theme of this run with Bellator?
I can only contractually say because I'm one of those rare cases. There aren't so many like me who are co-promoted in the two sports. You know, my contracts are very strictly state that I take my career one fight at a time, that wherever the best opportunity is for me, both Bellator and boxing has to agree that it's true, you know, that it is the best way for me to go and allow it to happen. So it's hard for me to say I'm going to make a run for the Bellator title and stay in Bellator for 2 years, or to say I'd like to go back to boxing and fight these people. Like, the politics of both sports just really make it difficult for me to have a clear trajectory of what the next year will look like. But, I mean, I will say that Bellator has been way more reliable on consistency. So,
Heather, can you share with us, at least if promoters in boxing were to come calling with a matchup that you like, do you feel like that's a decision that can be made that day? Does it take a couple weeks to kind of weigh things out? How long do you think a decision like that would go?
It really takes a long time, you know. Like, I'm getting ready now to train for this Bellator fight. That means after June 14th, if a great big boxing fight comes along, I'm not going to be ready till September, October, right? Because I'm going to spend the next 3 months kicking, grappling, wrestling, getting back into, you know, MMA and that kind of mode, that I really can't focus on doing a championship fight in boxing. I'm going to have to dive right back in and get my body back to used to boxing. I mean, it's not something that I can just blink my eyes and do tomorrow.
Gotcha. Bellator flyweight Heather Hardy is joining us here on the program. She has a fight June 14th at the Garden, live on DAZN. Richard Hunter from Phone Booth Fighting. What do you have for Heather?
Yeah, hey Heather. You know, having followed boxing for a long time, and then crossing over to covering MMA myself, just like Ghost was talking earlier, you know, I saw the differences in the business in terms of in boxing we had so many more competing promoters, like you were talking about earlier, and then that would require a lot more negotiation. It would require a lot more notice to get fights made and a lot more stumbling blocks and things like that. I think from a fan's perspective, they've always liked the MMA approach of, well, it seems like, you know, you start talking about a fight and you can make it happen pretty quickly, but that's not always to the financial advantage. That's not always to the financial advantage of the fighter, because the more in demand you are and the more people you have competing for your services, the more money that can be worth. So having done the business side of both businesses now, is there something to be said for being able to fast track getting fights together like they happen in MMA? Or coming from boxing, do you look at it and go, yeah, but you know what, financially and in terms of incentives and things like that, maybe I always ended up a little better in boxing because there was more of a protracted negotiation. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that might be true for the boys, you know, because the boys have historically made more money in boxing. Like, the top-tier guys in boxing make more money than the top-tier guys in mixed martial arts, but that's not really true for the women. The women are still about 15 steps behind. So now I'm at a point in my career where I'm finally making, I don't want to say good money, I'm not making quote-unquote boy money yet, but the purses are really competitive between my boxing and the mixed martial arts, which is relatively sad because I'm 22-0 world champion in boxing, and I only have 3 fights in MMA. But the purses are finally getting closer to where I really have decisions to make, you know? So I'm not seeing that huge discrepancy where it would be like, well, if I wait out, I'll get this big purse. So let's see if it happens, because it's really not there anymore.
What is the discipline outside of boxing, given the number of times now that we've been able to see you fight in MMA, that maybe in the back of your mind you've really gravitated toward the most in training, and you're really anxious for us to see? You know, sometimes on the MMA side of things, we talk about a guy who's just such a good striker. We know he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but we just never end up seeing any jiu-jitsu because he's such a good striker. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in that dominant aspect of martial arts, but is there something in the training process that, you know, even though you're happy to get the victories you've gotten, you've also thought, well, you know what, I still haven't gotten to show off that thing, that one aspect that I've really developed since I crossed over into MMA?
Well, it's not so much that I feel like I got better at one particular thing that I do outside of my defense, you know? Like, I don't think it's a secret, and I'm not shy in talking about it, that I got my whole face rearranged, right, my second fight. So there was a lot of talk about, like, Jesus, has she ever seen a kick before? So my kick defense and my kickboxing defense and things like that have gotten a lot better. I've expanded my sparring partners, and even through my boxing training, I mean, with the exception of the 4 months that I really stayed strictly boxing to train for my world title fight, you know, right after and also directly before in that little layoff time, like, I've had a lot of sparring with different sparring partners, and I've been experimenting a lot more with my kickboxing, because awareness of distance and, you know, what kicks can do, that takes some time. So definitely evolved in that sense.
Bellator flyweight Heather Hardy joins us on the program. Heather, I want to talk to you a little bit about something that you touched on a little bit earlier. See, here on our channel, we have a boxing show. It's 2 days a week. Jerry Cooney, Randy Gordon. And I get to listen to their show right before our show. And there's times where I get to hear your name, and it's so cool because I'll hear it about boxing, and then literally the next show we come on and we're talking about you, about mixed martial arts.
Sure.
So what I wanted to know was, you talked about the guys and how they're a little bit ahead as far as pay and even publicity, right? Like, what do you think has to happen for females to be promoted better in boxing? What would be that first step?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think that the males are promoted at all. You know, I talk about this a lot. Like, there are some of the most incredible athletes are boxers, right? Like, the discipline it takes to box is like second to none, right? And you have some of these top pound-for-pound boxers like Vasily Lomachenko, Terrence Crawford, and I kind of talked about it at the press conference today. The sad thing, though, is if Terrence Crawford walked in this room and sat down, how many reporters would recognize him by face? how many people would say, "Oh my God, that's one of the greatest, greatest combat sports athletes right now breathing"? A lot of people wouldn't know who he was because the promoters really don't promote the men either. The men are making money, but they're not getting that recognition on the scale of like a Derek Jeter and Aaron Judge, So I think boxing is quite a few steps behind MMA because in that sense, where the top tier people aren't making the millions and millions of dollars, at least people know who they are.
Do you think there's a reason why you look at some mixed martial artists and they're able to get some of these sponsorships outside of combat sports, but I don't really see that happening with the boxers, except for maybe the top couple ones at the top. Why do you think companies tend to go that way? Because some would say mixed martial arts looks to be the more brutal of the sports, right? Because back in the day, that's what they would say about boxing. Why do you think sponsorship like that doesn't come out? Because if more boxers are on commercials and things like that, they do become more recognizable, right?
Well, I think that it comes down to like marketing and how boxing promoters and MMA promotes their fighters, right? Like if you look at a really famous boxer like a Terrence Crawford, he might fight once or twice a year, right? So that keeps him active and relevant like once or twice a year. And even though he'll make tons of money, there's really not a lot of opportunity for him to showcase whatever products or so forth that maybe a company or a brand might want to showcase, right? Like you have baseball, 162 games a year. They're wearing Nike cleats, they're wearing them every single 162 games, whereas a boxer might only go out there twice a year. And because you don't have the promoters who are all these like old school guys from the 80s who aren't pushing social media platforms and trying to use the new ways, I just don't think that they're doing much to help the sport.
It's a very good point. I never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you what, our producer Josh, he has a question for you. He's a big fan of yours. Josh, fire away.
I do, Heather. And Goes, you mentioned you mentioned Goes early, the boxing show with Randy Gordon and Jerry Cooney. Well, yesterday, Lou DiBella, president and founder of DiBella Entertainment, and Heather, your promoter on the boxing side, broke a little news and said that there was a fight agreed to in principle between you and Amanda Serrano. I'm just wondering if you might want to confirm that, if there was any timetable, perhaps down the road, break some news maybe on the junkie side.
I'd love to go further on that, but I mean, what in fact is a fight agreed to in principle, right? I've never really heard that before. I mean, they ask you this type of stuff all the time. Hey, Heather, you ever want to fight Katie Taylor? Yeah, make it happen. Well, show me something. You want to fight Amanda Serrano? Sure, no problem. Heather, you want to fight in MMA? Okay, why not? Show me a contract, because in all of my years doing any kind of business, whether it be at one of my side jobs in boxing and mixed martial arts, unless I see it on paper, I'm not giving you my time.
I hear that.
Right?
I don't blame you one sec. I don't blame you one sec for that.
So, I mean, sure, it sounds like a great fight. Show me something. But outside of, you want to make the fight, we got nothing. And I'm not really about to sacrifice this huge opportunity at Bellator to sit around and wait and hope that maybe a fight can be negotiated. Because, I've been disappointed a lot of times in my career with boxing where the politics have promised to come together and then not been able to show out. So, and it's like, it's what it is, and I agree with it, and I'm completely on standby, open for talks, negotiations, and to hear what you want to do, but outside of that, I got tuition to pay, man.
See what she did there, Josh? What Heather is saying is, if a fight is agreed to in principle and it falls in the woods, but no one is there, did anyone really hear it?
Good point.
That's what she said.
Yeah. That's deep, Richard.
Hey, respect. It makes all the sense in the world to me.
Heather, you're always a blast to hear on this show, on At the Fights. We love talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. You can catch Heather Hardy fighting Bellator June 14th at the Garden, live on DAZN. Heather, before we let you go, would you like to thank anybody that helped get you here, your sponsors, anybody you like?
The first person I'd like to thank is Dan Hill. I mean, without my manager, I definitely wouldn't be here right now. I'd like to thank Bellator for being so extremely patient with all the ups and downs of my boxing career and allowing me this opportunity to fight on such a tremendously big stage. Thank you so much. And, of course, to Lou DiBella for, everything.
Awesome having you on. Thank you so much. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and we will come back soon here. You are listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Sirius XM Fight Nation 156.
Now back to MMA Junkie Radio with Goes and special guest co-host Richard Hunter.
Well, we gave Josh the challenge because all of our rejoins have Gorgeous George and Goes or Dan, for him to just come up with some on his own. I thought he did pretty well.
I thought he did too. He remembered my name. That was good.
Yeah.
Now I would like to have my own production. Follow me, because we don't have all that. Like, we didn't come out of the same ball sack or any of that kind of stuff, so we don't have a lot of those same references. We need new ones.
Sometimes I doubt whether I came out of the same ball sack with George.
Really?
Yeah. You don't think we're different?
Well, the thing is,
we barely look.
I think you look a lot like your dad, and I think George looks like a lot like your mom.
I said that the other day, and I can't remember who said it, but they were completely against me on it, and
really?
I thought that was so odd.
No, I think it's pretty obvious.
Anyway, it kind of sounds like you and I are debating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're having a daily debate.
Well, I'll tell you what. It is time for the daily debate.
What?
Hit it, Josh.
The brothers Garcia seemingly can't agree on anything.
Everybody knows it's duck season.
Rabbit season.
Duck season.
Rabbit season.
Whether it's food,
less filling.
Tastes great.
Less filling.
Tastes great.
Gambling.
Always bet on black.
I like red.
Black.
Red.
Black.
Red.
Black, dummy.
Or even social media.
Instagram.
Snapchat.
Instagram.
Snapchat.
The same applies to the biggest stories in MMA. Time for MMA Junkie Radio's Daily Debate.
Touch of gloves, Richard? There we go. Today's hashtag daily debate question for at MMA Junkie Radio. Can TJ Dillashaw repair his legacy if he chooses to return from his USADA suspension January 2021? Richard Hunter?
Repair his legacy. I mean, to the level that it has existed up to this point, I don't know. I mean, I think he can reclaim some semblance of a career. Sure, he's a fantastic athlete. I mean, I couldn't imagine him not being in still pretty top form, even with a couple of years going by. But in terms of reclaiming a legacy, like people are barely going to remember that this ever happened, no, because I think the timing could not be more unfortunate. If TJ Dillashaw were going to be 25 when he returned instead of 35, maybe, but I think that's going to be a big problem.
Well, here's the question. Do you feel like he's coming back at all? Because that is an option.
You know what? It depends on if the TJ seems to me, and I don't know him personally or anything, but just in what I've observed, he seems like a guy who has probably taken good care of his money, has a nice little setup for his life and things like that. So maybe he doesn't need to, but I could see the competitive side of TJ, the something I got to prove something side of TJ coming back to do it, and I would think that maybe that part would win out.
I actually am starting to lean towards he may not come back. But
do you think that's in relation to the fact that he's just been so
I just don't
silent?
know. He's been silent, but I don't know who he comes back with, how fans will react to him. This is pretty bad, what he did.
Yeah.
Okay. Can he repair the legacy? No. Because now we got champs. I mean, people are doing so many things to stand out from just being great that something like this is just easy to help people get rid of you in that discussion. Even a guy like John Jones, how many people say he would be the greatest of all time, but we have to weed some of these guys out. That's why it's so amazing things that GSP did, Demetrius Johnson. It's so amazing to us because we had to weed some of these other fellows out because of what they've done. Can he resurrect a career? Yeah. I mean, arguably, Brock Lesnar's probably going to walk into a title shot, right? He can do that. John Jones has done it. But his legacy, I think he just falls short. I think he falls right out of the discussion.
Yeah. And I also think that the things that were championed, like the things I brought up that I loved about TJ Dillashaw, like the fact that he would step on the gas and go for a finish when he was already up 4 rounds to nothing. Those are thoughts and memories that I have, but those aren't necessarily the ones that are reflected in the record books. So those define your legacy with people who know, but in terms of the way it's going to look on the printed page, this is going to be a huge one to overcome.
It looks like it's going to be a no from us. We got to see what Junkie Nation said. Junkie Nation came strong. They said 79% of them said no, he cannot. 21% said yes. It's sad, man. A guy with so much potential. But hopefully he can prove us all wrong. That's today's Daily Debate. Thank you for joining us for that. Josh, what are your thoughts?
I don't want to get any hate from Hal, being that I actually can be a fan of the guy. But, no, I mean, I hope he can bounce back. And I hope one day, yes. Yeah, I hope so.
I kind of hope
I'll say I hope so.
He was fun to watch. I thought he had a great skill set. I thought it was one of the top skill sets in there because he could do a lot of things to you a lot of different ways. It really sucked when it happened. And, I was thinking about something you said, Richard, and it's him coming out so quickly with all this. Does that make me lean towards he's not coming back? Actually, now that I think about it, it makes me lean towards maybe he is because maybe he just wants to get this over with as fast as possible and get it behind him. I mean, today is Tuesday. We've only said Conor McGregor's name once. That doesn't happen too often.
That makes Conor McGregor happy these days under the circumstances.
Yeah. You know who it doesn't make happy? Ross Pearson. He retired today. And he picked probably the worst day ever to retire.
Yeah.
But he was a fun fighter to watch. Great interview. He's been in our studio before. Just an all-around great guy. And tons of respect for him. One of the first toughs that was at, I believe his was UK versus, who'd they go at it with? Ireland or
Australia.
Australia.
Right? Yeah.
Fun season. And Ross Pearson, we wish you all the best. I mean, he fought a who's who of mixed martial arts: Edson Barbosa, Cub Swanson, Diego Sanchez, Ali Aquinta, Evan Dunham, Will Brooks, Jorge Masvidal, Francisco Trinaldo. That's no joke, man.
He's one of those guys that, win or lose, when you search his name on UFC's Fight Pass and a random fight comes up, you can sort of assume it's not going to suck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, some fighters you have to go, wait a second, which fight was this, before I invest some time? Him, you can just kind of hit the autoplay and know you're going to be entertained whether he came out with his hand raised or not.
Ross is definitely a class act, but I'll tell you what, we got the top of the hour break coming up here, but when we come back, we will be speaking to UFC light heavyweight Eryk Anders. Keep it dialed in to MMA Junkie Radio. We will be right back.
Tell your boss to reschedule that meeting. Call your wife and tell her lunch is off. It's time for more MMA Junkie Radio with Gorgeous George and Goes.
All right, we're back here on MMA Junkie Radio. Fun show so far, don't you think, Richard Hunter?
Absolutely.
I've been having a lot of blast, and the fun continues because guess what? We get to speak to Eryk Anders. This is a little bittersweet, and I'm going to tell you why. George, who usually hosts the show with me, is a big Eryk Anders fan. Not that I'm not. So big that he even bought his fight kit, and he wanted to be here wearing it when we had Eryk on.
Wow.
And I did not know this, and I booked Eryk, and unfortunately, George is probably wearing the kit right now, feeling like a fool. But we love us some Eryk Anders, and he's got a tough fight coming up. It's Khalil Roundtree. He's fighting him at UFC 236. Holloway versus Poirier. Let's get him on. Eryk Anders, how you doing, bud?
Man, I'm doing awesome, man. Yourself?
Not too bad. We're pretty happy over here to be talking to you. It's always a fun time to talk to you here on MMA Junkie Radio. Tell us a little bit, man. Like, I know this is fight week, and fighters have kind of shied away a little bit from doing shows around this time, but you were very chill, quick to respond, to get on. What's your mood like right now? Has it kind of kicked in yet? Or does that come a little later in the week?
Man, as soon as I signed the contract, it kicked in. Obviously it's getting closer and closer. But I think the biggest thing is I'm not cutting much weight, so I'm super happy to. I don't have to do anything, man. I just gotta, stay loose, warm up, train a little bit, a few times a day, and not really have to worry or focus so much on the weight cutting.
On that topic of the weight, I often say when fighters, we've seen you at middleweight, we've seen you at light heavyweight, when they go up or down in weight, to me it seems like when you buy a new car, and it takes you a little bit to kind of figure out, all right, this is how fast I go, this is when I need to brake. It doesn't take that long, but it takes a while to kind of figure it out. For you, 205, have you found that rhythm of when to hit the brakes, when to hit the gas, like what you're most comfortable with your body, fat versus muscle, all that new engine that you got there?
But I went back to lifting weights, starting swim. So I got a little stronger for this fight. I've been an athlete my whole life, and just always been in that. What do I need to maximize my potential for that particular sport or this particular weight or whatever? And I train all the time. And 205 is more of my natural walk around size. So when I'm eating good and I'm still training, so I know how to manage my energy, if you will, and my output at 205 because I train all the time, and I'm more the natural weight.
People, it's very hard for even high-level athletes to play multiple sports at a high level like that. I feel like people who do that are very special. And if you ever watch the ESPN shows, and they focus on guys like Deion Sanders that was able to do that, Bo Jackson, is there any one intangible that you could say that an athlete needs to have to be able to play two sports like that at a high level?
Not necessarily. I think that the guys like that, they just have a natural competitive. Like me, for example, the reason I got into MMA is because, I felt the need to compete again. I was living like a stagnant lifestyle. I found myself being sick, so I needed to do that. And it just so happened that because of the way I trained for football, I kind of applied that same process to MMA. I got really good really fast, which is why I'm where I'm at now.
They say that the losses teach you a lot. But we've heard from different fighters, they kind of approach it a little differently. And some of them say it's too dangerous to dwell on them over and over. It's best to move forward. But they also try and find this way to still pay respect to the past and what they've learned from them. How do you balance that for you, Eryk? Like, also respecting what's happened and what you've learned, but not dwelling on it too much as well.
I got a 24-hour, so win, lose, or draw. After 24 hours, I'm over it. It's on to the next. Maybe go back and watch film, but to correct any mistakes. Because even in a win, there's things that they're correctable mistakes. So just go back, watch the film a few times. But after 24 hours, I don't dwell on it anymore.
UFC light heavyweight Eryk Anders joins us here on the program. He's fighting Khalil Roundtree at UFC 236. Richard Eder from Phone Booth Fighting. What do you have for Eryk?
Hey, Eryk. You just mentioned that you're a guy who just win, lose, or draw. You're on to the next thing and all that sort of thing. But I was thinking about in your career, I always think about the incredible effort that you had in the Lyoto Machida fight. A lot of people, myself included, thought you won that fight. Is that going to be a story that, if people want to bring up that fight to you, talk about the Herculean effort they thought you had and that sort of thing, you ever get tired talking about that kind of stuff? And you're going to have other accomplishments in your career, but there are fighters who, for whatever reason, have those special nights, incredible efforts. And at the time, obviously against a big-name opponent with a big legacy and things like that. Do you ever get tired of talking about something like that if somebody brings it up, or would you see a point where you would, or can you see kind of always taking yourself back to that night and talking about it?
That fight was a year ago, and I fought 3 times since then.
Right.
So, it is what it is. People are going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. For me, it was a learning experience. First main event, fighting a legend. There are definitely levels to this. And, even myself, I feel like I, beat Machida, but 2 out of 3 judges didn't see it that way. So,
yeah,
it is what it is. It's a loss on the record. Lesson learned. But we're on to, we've been on to the next.
Okay. Then if we're going back just a couple of years, I'm going to try to go back even farther to University of Alabama for a second. Hopefully you won't mind that.
No, it's all good.
Okay. So I know you played under Nick Saban, but for a very strange reason the other day, I was thinking about a few years right before that era at University of Alabama, because I was cleaning out my garage, and I found a T-shirt that was sent to me by Arides Angels Strip Club in Pensacola, Florida. because I remember at the time I was on a sports radio station in Dallas, and I had to cover the firing of Coach Mike Price. Now, do you know this story, Eryk, at all? Did you have guys that are still
I know the story.
Okay. Do you know the story goes?
No,
okay.
I've never heard you speak of football in my entire life. So I am shocked right now that this is even happening.
This is some random knowledge I can bring to this. All right, Eryk, help me tell this story. But a couple of years before we can clue in goes here, and maybe the other listeners too if they don't know it. But a few years before Nick Saban was hired, they had a coach, Mike Price, who got hired and fired before he even coached a game, right?
Yeah, there was a period, I think Alabama went through 3 head coaches in like 8 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mike Price, he got caught. He paid for a prostitute with a check.
With a check?
And, they, the university didn't appreciate that. So, they gave him the axe early.
Now, let me tell you my affiliation with this story, Eryk. So I had the prostitute on my radio show, and she told me that the reason that they got caught, one of the reasons they got caught, because they were making so much noise, because she was in the hotel room yelling "Roll Tide," and Mike Price was yelling back, "It's rolling, baby, it's rolling."
Oh, man, I haven't heard that part of the story.
No kidding.
Yeah, well, that was my brand of investigative sports journalism back then. But I do remember that story, and the strip club was so happy that I mentioned them on the air. They sent me this, like, totally white trash-looking airbrush T-shirt that I still have.
You still have it?
Yeah, I still have it. I don't think it'll fit.
You must be a valued customer.
Me and Mike Price. I don't think it'll fit, Eryk, but the next time Eric's fighting in Vegas, I'll bring you the T-shirt just so you can have it to put on your wall with your other University of Alabama memorabilia.
Yeah, awesome.
It'll go next to the national championship jersey.
Eryk, so Khalil Roundtree, I mean, this is night and day from your last opponent. He comes to bang, you come to bang. The judges, we just tell them to stay home for this one?
Yeah, tell them to get comfortable because, I'm not going to have to do much. I just don't see this, there's no way this fight goes to a decision. It's either going to be him or me, and, I'm accepted that, and I'm cool with that. So, it's just got to go out there and make sure it's him and not me.
A lot of fighters say that they think about the bonuses before the fight, and some of them even say during the fight it comes into their head. A fight like this has bonus written all over it. Is that something that you think about, or does it just kind of happen and you deal with it then?
Man, every time I fight, I'm trying to get a finish and collect the bonus. So, I don't get paid by the hour, so I'm trying to get in and out real quick.
I like it. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to keep it short because it is fight week. We appreciate your time coming on here. That's Eryk Anders. You can follow him at Eryk Anders. Eryk, before we let you go, would you like to thank your sponsors, anybody that helped get you here?
Yeah, thank you, Infinite CBD. They do an awesome job with, CBD is awesome for recovery. So I can train, my hardest, and, Rev Gear for hooking me up with the gear to train.
Awesome, man. Awesome having you on. Thanks again so much for doing the interview.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Eryk.
That is Eryk Anders. Man, he's so much fun to talk to. I could barely play multiple sports, let alone be good at them at a high level like that, and to get into it like so late in your life. Doesn't that kind of just shit on everyone else's athletic ability?
Yeah.
Just be able to do something like that. Did you play sports growing up? I've never heard you talk about football in your life.
Yeah. No. I was on the debate team. Yeah. But I'll tell you, I did there was a brief attempt at some football, but I really didn't. I mean, until I started training jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is the most athletic thing I've ever done. And it's also the only thing I've ever accomplished, like in terms of belt levels and things like that. That's the only athletic accomplishment I've ever had. So,
fight.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Not a lot of people can say they did that.
My amateur fight record currently sitting at 0-1.
At least he did it. For those of you who don't know, Richard Hunter was part of a program, Wimp to Warrior is what it's called. And they train people. What was it? Is it 3 months?
5 months.
5 months. So for 5 months, Richard, and I know this because when I would talk to him, he would be up at like 5 a.m.
Yes.
He'd go down to Syndicate, and he would train.
Yeah.
And then it would all end with you having a pro MMA fight, which you had.
Amateur fight.
Amateur fight, sorry, yeah. And, he spoiler alert, it didn't go his way.
Did not go my way.
But you're doing it again, right?
I am doing it again. In fact, if anybody else wants to join in, this is a worldwide program. So just go to wimp2warrior.com, and no matter where you live, you're going to find affiliate of the program somewhere in your area. But here in Vegas, we're doing it at Extreme Couture this time.
Oh, nice.
And head coach is Jessica Rose Clark, UFC fighter, everybody knows. And we're starting it April 29th. So, yep, I'm doing it again. Here's why I'm going to do it again. Yes, obviously I would like to have a victory on my record, but I do feel like when I tell the old war stories, it's going to sound better if I talk about the fights that I had. I'm going to emphasize that S every time I say it. It just seems like it's going to be cooler to have a 2-fight record as opposed to a 1-fight record. So we'll start April 29th. And then
Tapology will look better, too.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm thinking. And so 5 months after April 29th, there will be yet another fight, and hopefully this time the guy will be shorter.
Now, Wimp to Warrior isn't just Las Vegas, right?
Worldwide. Worldwide.
Josh, I've seen you before with Jerry Cooney hitting pads. Would you ever do Wimp to Warrior?
If I'm getting paid?
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah,
I think that's a common answer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, Richard clearly has bigger balls than me. That's fine. But I literally fell on my head trying to catch a bus. So I have no coordination. And when I was getting screened after that, I told the doctor, I do some boxing, rare sparring or whatever, this and that. He's like, why are you going to do that if you're not getting paid? It made sense. So, hey, there's deep enough pockets out there. Maybe someone that would want to sponsor me. Shit, I'll do it.
I'm trying to think what he would look like walking out there with Jerry Cooney in his corner. I mean, that's a legend.
Yeah.
Josh, I think I would do it just for that. What would your walkout music be?
Probably Enter Sandman or Jump Around. I'm actually going to be cornering Jerry for his charity event coming up in June. I think that works out well. I'll hold the water bottle, let him throw hands, honestly.
What's the charity event? Because I remember he got offered a fight not too long ago. It was like a legitimate fight, right? With a big purse and everything, right?
He has so much going on, I can't even keep track of it. He might be having a movie coming out, a reality show. I know he does have a book coming out. It's crazy, but the charity event, it benefits. If you go to ycs.org, you can get yourself some tickets to it. It's June 8th in Jersey if you guys want to come up for it.
You're holding
maybe Richard, you could challenge. Yeah, I don't know exactly what my role is going to be, but I will be in the corner. Maybe I'll just be like the resident shit talker, I'll trash his opponent.
What kind of outfit does he have to wear? He's got to have a jumpsuit. He's got to have a towel over his shoulder. What are some of the cornermen?
I mean, I'm just going to wear something normal, but you do know the week before we did tell you about that bet that him and Randy made around the Joshua Miller fight. So if you want ridiculous outfits, it's going to happen the week before on At the Fights.
That's the Big Baby fight?
Yes, it is.
All right. Did they agree to something else or the idea that I gave them?
No, they stuck with they're betting the diaper. They're betting it.
So the way this is going to work is Jerry Cooney either has to wear a diaper on the show or Randy Gordon 3 times in 2019, Jerry Cooney can tell him, suck your thumb like a baby, and no matter where they're at, he's got to do that for a minute.
That's an interesting hypothetical.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Reed. I'm sorry. No, the bet is the Joshua Miller fight. Jerry's going with Joshua. Randy's going with Miller. Whoever's wrong, loser has to wear a diaper and do the show in a diaper the first Monday after.
Oh, both of them agreed to that part of it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he didn't want to wear the diaper.
No, well, they were swayed.
That thumb thing is interesting, though.
Man.
I like the idea of having it in reserve. Yeah. And you can just use it at any. You got 3 chips, basically.
At any moment.
Oh, that's
good
stuff.
You can just call that. Anyway, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, there's still a lot of news to cover, and it's going to be a fun show. Join us here on MMA Junkie Radio, Sirius XM, Fight Nation, Channel 156. We will be right back.
Lesnar still instinctively fighting his way up, still suffering the effects of the low blow, and 2 stops.
A third, a trifecta of stops. Cover by Rollins, hook to the leg. Seth Rollins is the Universal Champion.
MMA Junkie Radio goes Richard Hunter. Fight Nation, take it away.
I like it. That is Seth Rollins getting the pin over Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. People are asking, well, why are you talking about that? Well, we feel like that particular match at WrestleMania is going to have an impact on what happens in mixed martial arts. What do you think, Richard?
I think it absolutely does.
It told us something, right?
It did. It told us that Brock Lesnar is very likely headed back to the UFC, which he has done a number of times before. Brock Lesnar has become that guy for me. Like, he's like an absentee dad who every few years decides he's going to try to get back into your life, so he picks a big occasion like a high school graduation or a wedding or something, tries to show up, make up for lost time.
Yeah. He's always got that clip-on tie on.
I wasn't gonna miss
short sleeve shirt.
I wasn't going to miss your big day. So yeah, I think in all likelihood he's coming back to the UFC, and obviously has his sights set on Daniel Cormier, who absolutely has his sights set on Brock Lesnar, and that makes all the sense in the world for Daniel Cormier, because Daniel Cormier is going to steamroll Brock Lesnar.
You think so?
I absolutely think he is going to demolish him.
I love me some DC.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember the last time I picked against them. Mm-hmm. And I probably will pick DC, but I don't know. Brock Lesnar's a big dude, man. And I just feel like at some point these big guys are going to catch up to DC. I'm still going to pick DC, but you think he's going to steamroll him?
Yeah, I think he is. I think DC knows that too. I think it makes a lot of sense for him because, Cormier is already extending his retirement date. Mm-hmm. He's going to want, if he's going to fight 1 or 2 more times, he's going to want the biggest money fights he can get, and there will be no bigger money fight than Brock Lesnar. Plus, Daniel Cormier's a huge WWE fan. Here's something not a lot of people are talking about. Imagine Cormier does this. He steamrolls Lesnar in the UFC, and then maybe decides to retire from mixed martial arts, but maybe he'd like to go into pro wrestling. Imagine the cachet that Daniel Cormier would have going into the WWE if he had been the guy who had just decimated Brock Lesnar in the UFC.
I think he would do it just to make his kids happy. And I think he's like a big kid when it comes to pro wrestling. He was actually watching pro wrestling, which I know, he does it anyway, but he had to have his eyes fixated on this Brock Lesnar match. And we have some audio of what his thoughts were watching Brock Lesnar.
I thought it was pretty cool to hear Paul Heyman go, I'm going to jump on a jet to Vegas where I'm ultimately appreciated, right? That was a good use of the word ultimate. Go for the Ultimate Fighting Championships. But I thought it was good. I thought Brock, it was such a short match, but to see Brock kind of he looked strong a little bit, but to get beat that quick, it's kind of crazy. He never loses that fast. Goldberg did, actually.
How crazy is that, man?
Well, he brings up a good point, Goes, because you were saying, you think the size discrepancy between Cormier and Lesnar could be a factor. Brock Lesnar Sunday night, was beaten by a guy who barely weighs 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. And in just a couple of minutes. And if you saw the way he was defeated, this opponent of his appeared to put his foot on the back of Lesnar's neck and just push down. It was like there was no upper body strength. He just went right down face to the mat, and then he did it again.
Like a curb stomp?
Exactly like a curb stomp, but there was no resistance whatsoever, and it only took a couple of minutes.
Well, these clips, of course...
Do you like this character? Do you like...
Seth Rollins?
No, this character I'm doing right now. No. When I do the X's and O's analysis.
No, because you kind of threw me off with football the other day. Or, a little while ago, and now that the fact that I could have swore you were going to say something like, well, I heard this happen, but to know that you actually watched it and broke it down, now I feel like I kind of don't know you, which scares me because you have a lot of potential of mischief.
I drive Frank crazy with this when I talk about the pro wrestling analysis, because people always bring up him and Lesnar, at some point could they fight a third time, and I'll do the I don't know, Frank, man. Last time I saw Brock Lesnar, he had all he could handle with The Undertaker, and The Undertaker's like 60.
X's and O's. There you go. Well, these clips came from TMZ, a TMZ interview that they did with Daniel Cormier. In this clip, they asked the question that I think a lot of us want to know. And, okay, it seems like we're going in that direction, but when is this going down? Here's what he had to say.
I have no idea. I don't know. I know as much as you know.
Well, is that what you want, DC?
It's the fight I want, yes. I think everybody wants to fight Brock. You know, we all want to fight Brock. So, yeah, it's the fight. That's the fight that needs to happen. You know, he's a former UFC champ, all-American in college. This guy is very, very deserving of a fight, and he's going to get it.
I love me some DC, like I said before, but that's a lie. He absolutely has to have some kind of an idea. He cannot be on the same page as you and I and Josh. He knows roughly when this is going to go down.
Yes.
Brock knows roughly when this is going to go down. Let's make it happen, because he extended a little bit his planned retirement.
Right.
But you got to be active as well. And I know Brock's probably going to want some time. Definitely International Fight Week is out of the question. And apparently Daniel hasn't really said much about his injury. I have to imagine he's good and he's ready to go. This is the fight that I don't want to say makes sense. It makes sense for him. Daniel Cormier is the guy that has kind of done things the right way. He's helped the UFC out in a lot of instances. And there's a lot of instances where, look at John Jones, right? Not taking that fight here at Mandalay Bay. Cormier could have done that. Instead, he fought Anderson Silva, and it wasn't the greatest fight of all time, but he could have just said, nah, I'm over it, and he would have been within his right. So he's done the UFC a lot of favors. He's getting great as an analyst.
I also think it's the best thing for business. I mean, it's not like we're doing him a favor and they're going to, take a bath because of it. It'd be a huge seller anytime you put Brock Lesnar on a card. It's going to sell great. I'm sure with the new ESPN deal, they would love to have him a taste of some Brock Lesnar before that ship sails. So I think all conditions are right for it. I think it makes all the sense in the world for Cormier to want to do that.
Here is Daniel Cormier's message to Brock Lesnar.
Hopefully.
Brock's watching this. What do you say to him coming off his loss?
Lick those wounds, because I got some brand new ones waiting for you.
And to Dana White, the guy who ultimately can make this fight happen, what do you say to him, DC?
Dana, get on the phone right now. If you haven't called him yet, do it today. What are you waiting for? Get this shit on the books. Let's get this on the books.
So that laughter that he has, I've heard that laugh before, and it kind of reminds me of, it kind of points me in the direction of what you're saying, and it's that he has no idea that Brock Lesnar could even give him any sort of a fight. I think he feels like he's going to run right through him. He wouldn't be saying those type of things if it were a Stipe Miocic, even though he has a win over him. You're right. I mean, Daniel can be cocky at times, but it's this kind of cocky that you could just tell when he's being serious and when he's not. Here, I genuinely think you're right. He does think he's going to run right through Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar's a former champion. All right? I know that a lot of fighters, and you can kind of look at it the way you look at Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's done a lot of great things. He is a great fighter, phenomenal fighter. But a lot of people can poke holes in him. And I think a lot of people can do that with Brock Lesnar as well. But that's a tough outing in my he's just so massive. Like, you see a guy like Randy Couture and all the skill that he has, all the knowledge, and I think he just kind of succumbed to that size of Brock Lesnar. I don't know how many times Daniel Cormier can do this. You think he'll run right through him, though, huh?
I do, and I also think that one thing, when you talk about poking holes in Brock Lesnar's game, I don't think Brock Lesnar likes to get hit, and I think Cormier has been very successful with bigger opponents using his uppercuts. And I think that eating a few of those, not to mention more than a few, would probably not be real appetizing to Brock Lesnar. So I see that more as, Daniel Cormier's one of the greatest ever, and I think you couple that with the fact that Lesnar has been, where is Lesnar's commitment level in MMA? I mean, he's committed enough to come back periodically and take a big fight and make a nice check and all that sort of thing. But what's Lesnar chasing at this point in the UFC? The title shot? No. I don't think so.
I was just about to ask you that. What do you think he thinks in his head? Does he think? Because some fighters, I can't say who, but I've had a fighter admit to me that they've kind of looked at a contract before and say, am I willing to get my ass kicked for this amount of money?
Sure.
Does Brock look at that check and say, am I willing to get my ass kicked to come back and do this? Or do you feel like he can possibly, in his mind, put together a title run or just win this fight and go back?
I think one of Brock's greatest achievements has been the business acumen of bouncing back and forth between the two organizations, UFC and WWE, the way that he has, and each time he does it, he plays one against the other and drives the price up. I don't think he's done necessarily with the WWE if he doesn't want to be. What he could easily do is come back, jump in for a big fight like he did against Mark Hunt, on one of the biggest, cards of any, or that's always one of the biggest cards of any UFC year. He does that. He could do the same thing against Cormier, because realize that as much as I think Cormier is going to steamroll Lesnar, there's going to be a lot of casual fans, a lot of wrestling fans who are going to go, oh my gosh, the baddest guy on the planet, Brock Lesnar, is going to go over and fight the UFC's heavyweight champion. They're going to be betting on Lesnar. They're going to buy into it because of his mystique. So you do that, and then even if he comes up short against Cormier, I think he could easily end up back in the WWE. Like I said, to me it would make a lot of sense for Cormier to think about going over to the WWE. I think he'd like to do it.
I wonder what the reaction is going to be like from fans. I wonder, did anybody even look at it as, hey, Brock was serving a suspension? I think they just think he just went off to WWE and did his thing.
I think they
We talk about TJ Dillashaw
Yeah.
and legacy, and maybe we can get into that. Let's take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we can get into a little bit about what these type of allegations, these suspensions, how they react with a fighter's legacy, because Brock Lesnar's one, and we just talked about TJ Dillashaw. We can come back to that. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio here on SiriusXM Fight Nation Channel 156. We will be right back.
want a revolution. Well, you know, we all want to change the world.
All right, we're back
Tell
from
me that it's evil.
I'm sorry. I tried to get Richard Hunter to do a rejoin, and it looked like he was about to do it. You know what you look like? Like you were going to fart, and then you decided not to. But then you thought, well, maybe it doesn't smell, and then you said, nah, it'll smell.
Metaphorically speaking, you could be onto something.
Yeah. Did you have like an idea of which direction you were going to go to? It just didn't really work out, or? Because you had that face where you were stretching out for the finish line.
Yeah. It was more like, I just realized, it was like you have that thought, I'm not in my house. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fun show so far. Remember, you can always catch the rest of the show, Sirius On Demand. Our app is awesome. You'll catch Eryk Anders on there, Heather Hardy. Took a couple calls today. We can continue doing that at 877-FIGHT-93. That's 877-FIGHT-93. We were talking about Legacy, but before we do that, we're talking Beatles right now. And I'll tell you what, the Beatles channel has your chance to win a weekend trip for 2 Las Vegas. Our winners will see Paul McCartney Freshen Up Tour June 28th at T-Mobile Arena, and the very next night they'll enjoy a VIP experience at the Beatles Love Cirque du Soleil show at the Mirage Hotel and Casino. For official rules and to enter, go to SiriusXM.com/Beatles Las Vegas before April 22nd. No additional purchase necessary. I'll tell you this, that Beatles show is a lot of fun. And I don't want to ruin anything, but a lot of people like to get as close as they can to the stage. And I would recommend with that one and the Michael Jackson show, try not to sit so close to the stage. I think the better seat is actually the cheap seat.
Okay.
Especially Beatles Love.
All right, I'll keep that in mind.
And if you have seen Beatles Love, unless you've seen it in the last year, they kind of revamped it, so there's a couple more things to it.
I would very much like to see that show. I have not seen it.
I think Jen would like it too.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Anyway, we were talking a little bit about Legacy. Primarily TJ Dillashaw, how it would affect him coming back. Say he goes on a run, recaptures his title. Are people going to point to what just happened and just erase any thoughts of, no matter what he does, talking about him being one of the greatest of all time? I think we're both in agreements that that's probably going to happen, right? What about Brock Lesnar? If Brock Lesnar comes back and starches Daniel Cormier, that's one of the greatest fighters to ever live.
Yes.
And if you look at the resume that Brock had before that, it's okay. He did win a championship. He's got a couple legends on that list. How would you look at that? Is it time heals all?
Well, if Lesnar were to defeat Cormier, then yeah. I mean, that is an incredible punctuator on a legacy, and would basically fly in the face of everything I just said, which is that I don't even think this is going to be close.
I can picture you sitting there in that Alabama T-shirt, just shocked.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if he were to do that, especially given the point that Daniel Cormier is at in his career, which is, you're unquestionably you would upset future UFC Hall of Famer at that point. Yeah, that would be tremendous. I just don't see it happening.
Would MMA lose a little bit of credibility having a guy come over from pro wrestling and do something like that?
To short-sighted folks, yes, that could happen. And it could happen because only people who know the basics of, they know what pro wrestling is, they know what WWE is, and one of the guys from, the stage play came over and beat one of the guys in the octagon. That, of course, would be not realizing the pedigree that Brock Lesnar brings with him. And I don't mean to dismiss that. I mean, you're right to point out, his amateur wrestling pedigree, his heavyweight title reign here in the UFC. Some of these, he's got to win over Frank. I mean, some of the legends that he's fought and some of those that he's beaten. But Yeah, I mean, there would be some people that would think that, but I don't know that that opinion would be as consequential because those people who would think that might be more casual observers anyway, and I don't know that they're the UFC's best customers.
I'm curious to know, Richard. He's your co-host.
Yeah.
Frank Mir. What's his take on Brock Lesnar? He beat him once. Brock beat him once. What does he think about the guy? Did that just feel like a bad night for him? I know he's always wanted to get a third one with him.
Yeah. I think Frank thinks probably some of the same things that I pointed out, which is just that he thinks Brock is very resistant to taking punishment in a fight. I mean, if it looks like Brock's having the better night, then that can be a real good night for Brock. But you don't see a lot of back and forth affairs throughout his career, and that he doesn't like to get it. And then also in the years that have passed, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's gotten older. And not that he hadn't necessarily stayed in shape, but when you're talking about what that job requires in the WWE, I mean, his title reign in the WWE has been predicated on a large number of suplexes against a guy who is willing to be suplexed. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I mean, how much of an edge can you maintain over multiple years? In that sense, but by the way, you're not coming back to the UFC and fighting some other heavyweight who's been largely inactive in the cage for a couple of 2 or 3 years. You're fighting not only the reigning heavyweight champion, but one of the most competitive guys that has ever fought in mixed martial arts, in Daniel Cormier.
We've seen Brock Lesnar compete in pro wrestling. We've seen him compete in mixed martial arts. But we just recently saw Frank Mir compete in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
A little different than I think what we're used to is Josh Barnett's gig, but what was it called again?
It was Josh Barnett's Bloodsport. That's what he called it.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the movie,
yeah,
the ring was set up kind of like the ring is set up in the movie Bloodsport.
Yeah, there were no ropes. It was just kind of the flat canvas.
Almost like a skate ramp
surface,
sort of looking. Did he enjoy all that?
He did. He wrestled Dan Severn, who Severn himself, after his UFC Hall of Fame career, went to pro wrestling, and it was not. He was in the WWE, but he was the NWA champion for a lengthy period of time and had some success in that. So Frank did enjoy it. It was one of those things where, yes, it's pro wrestling, and yes, it's a work, as they say in the business, or the outcome's predetermined. But you're also talking about a couple of guys who know how to wrestle and who know how to apply holds. Like, this was always the thing I never understood, why this gap was not closed in pro wrestling. Like, as mixed martial arts became more and more of a mainstream thing, and more fans and observers became familiar with, what a triangle is, what an armbar is, things like that, why more pro wrestlers just didn't take the time to learn to apply those holes to look authentic. I mean, sometimes they do, but ones who don't know, like ones who don't have that background or training, so like CM Punk, for example, I mean, was training jiu-jitsu the whole time he was pro wrestling. So he knew how to apply that to make it, I can put you in a triangle and just not flex, and you can scream, and people, it'll look right. It'll look authentic. But if I leave both your arms outside the triangle, for example, why am I doing that? Is it just because I don't know I need one inside to make it work? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's one benefit that Frank is going to have if he wants to keep doing any pro wrestling, particularly taking on opponents like Dan Severn, where both opponents are going to know the right way to do things, the right way to make it look, and then put on a show and sell it from there.
How far is he willing to go with that? Is that because we could see them maybe match up in a ring, Brock Lesnar?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely sell that. I think he would do that, no problem. I mean, the good thing about having a situation like Frank's is that he comes in with a built-in image. Like, you don't have to make up a character for him. You don't have to get him on the mic and he has explained to people who he is. I mean, just being able to, come into if he were to come into pro wrestling to eventually face Lesnar as the guy who had caused Lesnar to tap out in the the UFC before, that would be a huge calling card. So yeah, I think he would love to do that. It seems to pay well, and it's a little easier on the body.
That's pretty interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, Frank Mir's a legend, and a couple other legends did battle today in MMA history.
That's right.
The anniversary of Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin. We all remember where we were when we saw that fight. We're going to talk about that when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. This is MMA Junkie Radio on SiriusXM Fight Nation, channel 156.
For the winner, by unanimous decision, Forrest Griffin!
All right, we're back. MMA Junkie Radio. I am Goes. That is Richard Hunter. Gorgeous George is off today. Dan Tom is off today, but Dan Tom's actually here. We're going to do some work after the show. It's always a good time after the show. So that audio comes from Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin at the Cox Pavilion duking it out. Today's the anniversary. We all talk about this fight because we feel like it had a big impact on mixed martial arts, but an even bigger impact on the UFC itself. It's the 14-year anniversary, and Dana White often credits this fight for keeping the UFC afloat. The Ultimate Fighter, something that him, Lorenzo, Frank came up with, and this was the culmination of that season. And I think a lot of us hardcores at the time were watching it, and it really was the way you describe it. I remember texting a lot of people in the middle of the fight saying, "This is crazy, you got to watch this." Do you remember where you were when you watched that, Richard?
Yeah, my living room, Dallas, Texas. Yeah, I mean, just watching it just like you described. Couple of guys. I was working at a sports radio station, so a couple of guys that were MMA fans and I were talking about it. But this was a time where everybody but those few guys at the station thought we were, I mean, akin to sci-fi nerds or something at that point. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they were just like, oh, that, whatever, you know, I can't believe you watched that kind of thing. But it was kind of a point of pride to be able to talk about it the next day, that kind of seminal moment had occurred in MMA, you know. And obviously the Spike TV executives felt it too, because as you often hear Dana talk about, that first season, the deal was not in their favor, you know, with Spike. I mean, they were paying to be on the air. And then I believe, and then after that, it was the Spike TV executives, I think, behind the building saying, "Hey, how about we turn this into a long-term relation? I'd like to make an honest woman out of you."
Well, I'd like to say that, I mean, you want to say that they would have been able to continue without it, but this is one of the reasons why we hear Dana White say that he had even thought about inducting the entire season into the Hall of Fame. Every single one of those guys that went in there, it was just such a big deal. And I kind of get nostalgic when I hear clips from the fight. I remember watching it. I remember who I texted, who I called that day. And even when I go into the Cox Pavilion, which I've actually called fights in there before, and I remember thinking, man, this is crazy. That fight happened right here, right in the center of that court, a basketball court. For those of you who don't know, UNLV's women's basketball team plays there. And there's just so much history. And then even when the Tough Gym closed down, I wish I could have walked in it one last time just to kind of see and remember, take some pictures.
Yeah, that's one that to me, I don't know why that couldn't have been converted into some sort of museum or something.
Maybe that's where you put the Hall of Fame, right, or something?
Yes,
well,
right.
I mean, I guess maybe it is a weird place to send people, but yeah, just.
Or you know what you do? No, here's what you do. You pack the whole thing up and you reassemble it at the Performance Institute. There's got to be room over there for that.
That would
right?
be cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of like when
a movie set,
like when Conan O'Brien goes to Chicago for a week.
Exactly.
Yeah. Build the set there.
Yep.
Huh. All the same stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think people would. Yeah.
So they're gonna have like their own little arena now. And that's where they're gonna do their tough fights.
Right.
And Contender Series.
Yeah.
But that's pretty interesting. That'd be cool. I like that. They do that with some of the Hall of Fames. They kind of reenact certain scenes, and you know, like if it's boxing, they just have the corner or whatever. But it looks identical. Even the people behind it. We used to have one here at the Luxor. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Did you hear? You're really gonna impress me if you know anything about this. Apparently, the football fan over here. Are you a basketball fan?
No.
Magic Johnson.
Squeaky shoes.
Too many squeaky shoes.
Yeah.
Magic Johnson just stepped down as the president of the Lakers.
Oh.
That's another big deal in sports when Magic Johnson announced that he had HIV.
I remember that one.
I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5th grade. And I just remember teachers crying. Now, I'm from Orange County. Because they had
sex with Magic Johnson
maybe, yeah.
when he came through.
Not the ones I had.
Oh.
I grew up in Orange County, so you know it's not that far from LA, and nobody really pays attention to the Clippers at that time. So it was a big deal in Southern California, but yeah, I mean he's a huge star. So to see him have a role in the Lakers organization again as owner, as president, and now I guess him just leaving caught everybody by surprise, because I was telling Josh right before the show, I was reading some some news about him and Luke Walton and how they're not talking. And Josh, so he just kind of sprung this on people?
So I actually have a clip here, a surprise press conference before the game. I mean, the Lakers are playing tonight.
Yeah, it's our last
They have
game.
a game coming up. So I wonder what's going on, backstage right now. But yeah, man, take a listen. Actually,
Yeah,
Goes and Richard. This is just a surprise presser from Magic Johnson. Hasn't even informed Jeannie Buss as of this audio.
I think that with her and I want to always preserve our relationship and love her. And then I think that I had more fun when I was able to be the big brother and ambassador to everybody.
Well, if you want to preserve the relationship, isn't this the kind of the wrong way to go about it? I would imagine you would tell her first, no?
Yeah.
That's the way it went down. That's kind of weird. I mean, it'd be like Dana White just showing up and exiting the UFC without telling anybody. And, man, would that change the landscape of mixed martial arts?
Yeah.
What do you think life post-Dana would be like?
You know what? I think it would be a lot harder to sell. I think Dana White has always been so valuable as the face of the UFC. And he's been, people always talked about how and they would say it disparagingly, like, well, he's the biggest celebrity in the UFC, for a long period of time they would say that. Yeah, but maybe that served them quite well, because before there was a Conor McGregor that came along, or even a Ronda Rousey, or Brock Lesnar, whatever. They had characters. I mean, they had Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture and stuff like that, but they needed a mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And Dana always did an awesome job. Dana's a guy who can get you to buy a pay-per-view on 2 minutes' notice.
Well, because it makes you feel dumb if you don't.
Yes, he does.
And I don't want to feel dumb.
No, you could spring a pay-per-view. The UFC could spring a pay-per-view on Dana White. They could book one and not tell him it was scheduled, and 2 minutes before it was set to air, tell him, hey, we need you to go on the air and sell this. He would sell it, and he'd get me to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
He's that good. So in terms of what would it be like, I think it would be a tremendous void just in terms of who's going to speak on behalf of this organization. I mean, somebody can competently do it, but they can't do it in the style of Dana White.
That is very true. And I kind of like this topic. Maybe we'll touch on this a little bit more tomorrow. Today's show is wrapping up. I want to thank Richard Hunter for coming in and co-hosting. I want to thank Josh, because, Josh, you were fantastic. Do you have any help today? Is Gabby in the back or something?
Nah, it was solo. It was fine. Flying
Right,
this big
it's
bird
solo.
around solo, as the commish says.
I like it. I want to thank Eryk Anders for coming on the show. Fun as always. And Heather Hardy. Great interviews. SiriusXM On Demand. Go there. You can hear all of those interviews. And you can hear me and Richard going off a little bit today. That's our show for today. Thank you very much to everyone listening. Tomorrow, Richard Hunter will be right back here with me. And so far, we got Dave LaGreca on the program tomorrow.
Talk some more pro wrestling.
I can't wait to get into it. For all you guys out there, thank you very much. I am Goes. That's Richard. Y'all be champions.